Israel's Prime Minister says he will press on with plans for a ground offensive in Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians are sheltering. World leaders have warned Israel against sending troops to Rafah, but Benjamin Netanyahu says it equates to telling them to lose the war. Israel's cabinet has also voted on a resolution opposing the recognition of a Palestinian state. Associated Press correspondent Elena Bakatouris is in Jerusalem for us now. Elena, what was the result of that vote?
Well, the cabinet has approved this declaration, which says in no uncertain terms that the Israeli government will reject any kind of unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. Now, this is essentially, this has been the Israeli government's stance from the beginning. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is the head of a coalition government that is the most right-wing government that Israel has seen. So this has been its stance all along, but it has reiterated this in no uncertain terms, especially in the face of growing international pressure to find a lasting solution to the war, not just a ceasefire to end the current conflict in Gaza, but to have a more permanent solution in this region. So it's clear that the Israeli government is doubling down. As you said, the Prime Minister has insisted that a ground operation must continue in Rafah. He says that this is where Hamas still has a stronghold, and that the only way to win this war and to see the release of hostages who are still being held in Gaza is to crush Hamas militarily. Now, there have been ceasefire talks, negotiations being held in Cairo. These are being brokered by the United States, Qatar and Egypt, but so far they don't seem to be going very well. Last night the Qatari Prime Minister said that they had not been proceeding as expected, and the Israeli Prime Minister also said that he had sent a delegation there, but he has pulled them out, and that he sees no reason for them to return to the talks unless Hamas changes its stance. He's accused Hamas of making delusional demands, and he says that the only way that this war can end is if Hamas is crushed militarily and is no longer able to control any part of the Gaza Strip. Now, ahead of this ground offensive into Rafah, he has said that the civilian population will be moved out, that a plan will be put in place. But there are around 1.4 million people currently sheltering in this town. Where they will go, how they will be evacuated, indeed when they will be evacuated, still remains very unclear.
Indeed. And what about the domestic pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu? There have been anti-government protests and increasing pressure from the families of the hostages for a negotiation. Are they having any traction at all?
Well, so far, as you said, there is increasing pressure, in particular from the families of the hostages. They reacted with outrage to the news that the Israeli delegation had been pulled out from the talks in Cairo. They want a negotiation to have the hostages released. There are believed to still be around 100 hostages still alive, still being held in Gaza, and the remains of roughly 30 others who either died on October the 7th in the initial Hamas raid into Israel that sparked this war, or who have died since. Now, their reaction to this news that the Israeli Prime Minister had pulled out the delegation was a spontaneous protest. There were people blocking the street. They were chaining themselves to the railings. There was another protest last night. This comes on the back of a long wave of protests against the government. Even preceding the war, there had been mass protests against a judicial reform that the government had introduced and that opponents were saying was concentrating too much power in the hands of the government. So this is a long pattern of protests, but in particular, the families of the hostages are very concerned for their loved ones who are still being held in Gaza.